Come on in the room. Tell your people I say, come on in the room. Yes. Greetings, welcome, greetings, Bargani, divine, all blessed, peace and love, testing. 1, 2, 3. Are we living? Are we breathing? Today, I am with you. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Welcome. Baramaniko, Indo Ra, Baramayako, Baramayakanda, Olodi, the scourge of the town, Alofa, the arrow shooter, Afi Alagbangbo, Dejaru, user of baton to cause more confusion. Listen, and ye shall hear me in the winds. Know it is my thunder that gives a warning in the dark. Do not dare deny me through false tongue, my daughters. Do not anger me with fences of blindness, for you must run wild and free of injustice to celebrate me, and it is you who must call forth the storms of change. I am, because my creators are all powerful, open, and receptive to all that operates for my good here and now in this divine moment in time space. I create and recreate my divine destiny, and I am because my creators are without beginning or ending. I am eternal. Realize, realize, real eyes see clearly. To realize is to bring a thought, a vision, a power, an ideal onto earth plane existence. To realize is to first understand. We understand here, but we understand from in here. Realize you are and walk in magic. Realize you are and walk in voodoo each and every day, every moment of your life, of your breathing, of your existence. You are projecting upon the canvas of your life, your inner creation. Within this wisdom is the understanding that a God must be in relationship with itself. A God must be in relationship with this dark matter. I invoke my shadow side to teach me, to show me what I'm here to learn in becoming a balanced and conscious being and becoming a God, to help me to develop honor and creativity, integrity, endurance, commitment, compassion, harmony, empathy, mercy. I honor and acknowledge the God in you, and I honor and acknowledge your humanity. I am in relationship with my own humanity. Therefore, I can empathize and build relationship with humanity. To deny humanity self, to deny divinity is to deny self. And I always welcome you, greet you into this sacred space of gods and goddesses here live on YouTube. You are now sitting with me live and always an archive here at your leisure and convenience with the DivinePrince, Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeya Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective, understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is my constant prayer, my mantra, my affirmation, reverberation, reiteration, and my personal ever-living reality. It is crucial to the very foundation of my understanding, my teaching, my walk, my work, and my demonstration along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. It is how I, Voodoo Tai, the Divine Prince, make sense out of all that I am challenged with here in this earth plane existence. And it is how I begin and end all my endeavors. It is my being. It is my very raison d'etre. All is truly and indeed a blessing. I invite you to participate, to comment, to please do type your questions in capital letters so that I can see them and respond to them in the chat. And limit your comments to lowercase or common script, unless it is something that I need to read out loud and respond to here on the show. We are talking about witches. We are talking about Black witches. We are talking about religion and its effects. In some cases, some would say it's birthing of witchcraft. We indeed are going to talk about every degree of witch today to give you a better understanding, a clearer understanding of not only what that is, but what powers you are calling on, that you are drawing upon. I am not here to teach religion. I'm not here to decide for anyone what they should or should not do, what path they should or should not take. That is my role. I am not a proselytizer. I am not Miss Cleo. I am not Tammy Faye Baker. I am not Creflo Dollar. I am indeed the Divine Prince, King and leader of New Orleans, authentic New Orleans voodoo. I'm here to reconnect you to authentic voodoo practice. And wherever you practice voodoo in the world, you have to understand voodoo in its entirety. So you cannot be a voodoo practitioner in New Orleans and be ignorant of Haitian voodoo and be ignorant of West African voodoo. You cannot be a practitioner of this voodoo in West Africa and be ignorant of the Middle Passage and be ignorant of slavery and be ignorant of Haitian voodoo and New Orleans voodoo, but also voodoo as it shows up in the Black community in America. You cannot be an authentic Haitian voodoo practitioner and not have knowledge of New Orleans voodoo, Louisiana voodoo, West African voodoo. For indeed, to operate in the system, you must have knowledge of the system. To operate in the system, you must be taught, you must have studied, you must have read, you must have sat at the foot of elders, you must have sat at the foot of mentors, and you consume a great deal of information. Some of you have a great memory, so you're able to memorize, like griots, memorize stories, histories, lineages, powers, if you will. Some of you are better at memorizing and digesting music, rhythm patterns, notes, tones, harmonies. So we all digest information in different degrees. We all digest information in different levels. We all take in light and information in varying degrees. And that's why I speak. I'm not going to speak about crystals today, but that's why I speak about crystals so much, because they are one of the most basic, root, elementary, technologically advanced products that Mother Earth has birthed and given us. It is water, it's light, and by all means is crystal in the crystalline structure. Jacob's ladder shows up in our DNA. It shows up in every facet of our being and our existence. So we're going to talk about witches today. And I pray you have questions. I pray you have comments. For indeed, there's so many people who have gotten aboard the van towards paganism and witchcraft, and particularly as it shows up in social media. Oftentimes, I think it's just a face, a filter, a different type of filter, maybe not an app filter, but some other mask that people put on when they come online on the internet. Some people don't want to be identified, don't want you to know who they really are, and they wear a mask. Others believe that they are operating authentically and that they are projecting who they absolutely are. But indeed, they utilize the filters, they wear the mask. And so today, in today's pop culture, in today's social media environment, We have the mask of spirituality. We have the mask of voodoo. We have the mask of Palo. We have the mask of witchcraft. And so I want to talk about witches, particularly from an African-based perspective, from a Pan-African spiritualist-based perspective, and give it some meat. Um, some of you may choose to continue on that journey, but be clear about the journey that you are walking upon. First, before I say anything, I want to say the concept of witches is relatively new when we look at the hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary process of humanity in terms of culture, spirituality, religion, symbolism, and practice. I would also say that witchcraft might just be birthed from mainstream organized religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, out of the oppressive environment that exists when we look at the time that these mainstream religions were being formulated, were being organized, were being congealed, if you will. We look at a great time of oppression. We look at the crusaders who fought and killed to enforce Christianity on the world. We then look 100 years later or more at Muhammad and the rise of Islam and the religion of Islam, and then sort of a kickback, if you will, from the Moors to do much to the world what had already been done to the world by way of the Crusaders. And I believe, this is my belief through my own study, my own research, that witchcraft, as we know it today, grew out of that oppressive environment. When we think of people being killed for witchcraft, when we think of women particularly being greatly oppressed under these ravenous witch hunts, when we think of bisexual and gay and transgendered people often being targeted under these oppressive regimes. And I'm not talking about a modern context here. I'm talking about an ancient context where the ability to operate in and out of spirit during the Dark Ages would have been seen as a frightful, frightful thing. It also would have been seen as a power, a great power. And so this hysteria over witches was fueled not just by, imagination and fear, but by this idea that the ability to harness supernatural forces um, was a very threatening idea, a very threatening concept. We note that the idea of evil, negative and positive, exists in indigenous cultures throughout time. It predates witchcraft as we know it, the idea of witchcraft as we know it. To bring it a little bit more closer into our time frame, we also now have to look at the modernization of technology, commercialism, pop culture, and its ability to access greater um, populations in the world through media, radio, TV, now the internet. And so the idea, the concept, the notion that is witchcraft has transformed in that time. And there are several forces that affect this transformation. Um, One is the effect of organized religion. And so people who have come out of these organized religions or still to some degree support them or have families that support them have sought to tone down the nature of what witchcraft is. And so, again, pop culture has presented a very different look than what is authentic to true witchcraft. And I'm going to go into detail to what is authentic to true witchcraft if you would just bear with me and allow me to build this foundation, okay? I'm also looking forward to your capitalized questions and comments. So I will be responding to each and every one of you individually. Just give me a moment. So when people are being burned at the stake and stretched, on racks under the power of the Inquisition, understand we're looking at 1200, 1300, 1400, 1500, and maybe indeed even a little bit earlier than that. We know that the concepts of Christianity predate Christianity itself. We know that the idea of a crucified Savior, an idea of a Savior being born of virgin, is a story that was told in ancient Egypt at least a dozen times or more that predates Christianity. So we know that the notion of a singular God, some would even say that Akhenaten was actually Moses. There's a book, and the author and the name is not readily on my tongue, but there's a book that suggests that they were indeed the same individual. So we know that these events, the congealing of these organized, structured religions, and this idea, this notion of witches, demons, all sort of go hand in hand. The idea of demons, for instance, is a notion that is almost entirely um, specific to organized religions. When we look at indigenous structures, indigenous cultures, they know evil, they know good, but they also know what is helpful, what is beneficial, what is in balance. So the idea of wickedness, good and bad, is very different in indigenous culture. If indeed it produces life or health or benefit, things work in balance in an indigenous culture, whereas things take on more extreme nature in organized religion. It's either hot or cold, good or bad in organized religions, as opposed to a more circular, spherical, cipher-like approach to life, humanity. So in studying both spirituality and religion, these are arenas that I have had to look at in coming to this understanding about witchcraft, the nature of witchcraft, and what that is, and indeed how it has manifested and become part of our society today. So if I wasn't clear, I first believe witchcraft and the idea of witchcraft is a byproduct of organized religion, and maybe even the victims of this power, the oppressed of these world powers, looking for ways to fight back. Just a quick but important side note here. Voodoo, as we know it in the New World, was an act of fighting back. What was an act of responding to the oppression in which we found ourselves in. We know that existed and it predated slavery. We know this, but we know that the practice, the reasoning for, the motivations behind were very different before colonization, before the missionaries, and then ultimately enslavement got involved. So I view witchcraft in a similar fashion. Now, I also view witchcraft as having its roots in European culture. European culture, um, particularly when we go back in its more indigenous state and look at the world and Europe, more indigenous cultures like the Nords, the people who gave us the ruins, for instance, more Thor and more. I don't know why it is. Sometimes I lose my words when I get on camera because I'm trying to pay attention to so many things at one time. But when we look at a more natural, more holistic, some of you would say Wiccan, but even the word Wiccan is a new word. Um, in the last 100 years, maybe, we have the word Wicca or Wiccan. That is not an indigenous word. What language is that from? What particular people is that from? So the idea of witch and witchcraft have its root there. Also, when we look at the binding of spirits, the powers that motivate witchcraft are often ego-based. Me, myself, and I, capturing a spirit, a demon, an angel, trapping it, if you will, controlling it, if you will, to do often carnal things, your bidding, fleshly things, um, beauty, make me prettier, make me richer, make me younger, make me stop aging, things that are primarily self centered. We don't see quite that same pattern when we look at indigenous, Mayan, Aztec, um, 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 West African indigenous ATR practices, Asian practices. We look at a more village mentality, we look at a more communal mentality. And then when we see the conversation of witches in those environments, we're looking at things that disrupt the order, people who upset the order of things, people who are seeking to harm individuals, children, families, the structure and the peace of an environment or a village. We don't often see in the documentation and archaeology sort of this pattern of a more self-based approach to these spiritual, to these supernatural, to these magical practices. Indeed, we see healers, we see griots, we see those that speak and communicate with the dead and with the ancestors. We see those who can harness the power of Orisha, of Loa, of various deities of the world that exist to not only help us, uh, but to propel us forward. We have to understand that some of these spirits, Jinn, for instance, are earth based. They are a part of the powers of earth. So you have spirits that are of the earth, of matter itself. You have spirits of water. You have spirits of fire. You have spirits of air. But that's completely separate from the dead. That's completely separate from the realm of ancestors. That's completely separate from the realm of Loa and Orisha, which in most cases, save maybe a deity like Shango, in most cases, these are fire and air powers that have never had a human incarnation. So you're talking about different degrees, different levels of spirit. When we look at witchcraft, we are often looking at utilizing both demonic entities to do work and then ways of seeking control and empowerment over other people. We see this show up in Hoodoo. Um, you know, keep them quiet and close their mouth rituals. Many of you know about the cow tongue, and how we utilize the cow tongue in some cases to stop gossip and stop vicious and malicious talk. Um, but you're talking about a very different source of power that is being drawn from in that case versus what is happening in real legitimate witchcraft. Now some of you are calling yourselves witches and are using witch as sort of an internet mask. And I spoke of that just a little bit earlier in the show. And you really don't know anything about real witchcraft. You might not care to know anything about real witchcraft. And somehow you see only the positive in it, not understanding that there's a universal balance to all things. So even when you look at indigenous practice, healers, uh, um, sangomas, okay, we're operating in the realm of spirit, in the realm of power. But when you're looking at witchcraft, witches in particular, you're looking at someone who's pulling from a darker realm of force, someone who's pulling from a more self-based realm of power. And it is not something that is commonly accepted in more indigenous cultures because of the element of disruption to the community. Today, we see children and old people being tortured and terrorized in many parts of Africa over this sort of witch hysteria that mimics to some degree the Salem witch trials and the European fear of particularly women, but then the people who are different utilizing supernatural forces in a way to cause harm and to cause danger. And in many cases, these people are not witches at all. And the idea, the notion now that is something that we should like embrace wholesale, which I want to talk a little bit about that as well. The evolution of witches and indigenous practices becoming a part of this melting pot, this gumbo of often mislabeled paganistic systems, because voodoo is not paganism. Uh, let's be clear, ATR is not paganism. Let's be clear. And paganism is a word, again, in my opinion, like witchcraft, that is a byproduct of organized religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But particularly Christianity is the environment in which paganism, the word, the concept, is born from, and it is a way of demonizing, invalidating anything that's not Christian. In a modern context, in a less studied context, we view everything now that's spiritual somehow as paganism. Is yoga paganism? Is meditation paganism? No, but people who are less informed might assume as much. So in the social media stratosphere, this sort of blanket generalization and then the putting on of look and trends and fads and mask in social media has now made this even more confusing for the person who's seeking clarity, who's seeking knowledge, who's trying to find their own way. And I often say and suggest first and foremost that you seek your ancestors. I don't know. I don't know who you are. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. You have ancestors. You have a lineage with which exists within your bloodline, even if you don't know it yet, even if you aren't educated about it yet, even if you aren't aware of it yet. So always start there first. But then just in the studying, I always say read every context. Many of us have many roads within our bloodline. It's very few people, and particularly here in America, who can claim to be of a pure blood or pure lineage to one particular any person, place, or thing. Um, Indeed, we have a little bit of many nations within us. Nation is a political term. So we have a little bit of many ethnicities and tribes and families within us. And so many of your gifts show up out of that first. So always seek self first. It's another way of saying seek self first. In looking at our ancestors, we also are looking at ourselves. We're also looking to identify who we are. When you start talking about being a witch, the implication there is someone who is empowered, who's knowledgeable of an array of sciences, not only crystal, mineral, stone, but herbs, plants, roots, applications, and danger zones of those said products, the maneuvering in and out of spirit, which has a array of degrees. Even psychic and spirituality does not all mask and show up in the same way. Everybody can't be a tarot reader. Doesn't mean you're not spiritual. Everybody's not a tarot reader. Everybody doesn't have telepathy. Everybody is not an empath. You still can absolutely be spiritual, but there's an array, a degree of things that you can be and that you operate in. So when we say witch, when we say pagan, they're very generalized terms. When I say voodoo, it's a very generalized term, but I'm conscious of it. And many of you have heard me say that when I say voodoo, I mean everything West African ATR is voodoo. And you ask the average African who lives in Africa, who I communicate with every day, I communicate with somebody from Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, every day. If you have internet, there's no excuse for you not being able to access these other cultures if you know how to build relationships, if you know how to communicate, okay, with people. So when you ask them, particularly in a modernized environment where many of the West Africans have been Christianized, Islamicized, you might find them that might say, yeah, I still do, and still am involved in the indigenous thing. But for many of them now, it's tourism and a show. Many of them have converted to these world organized traditions. But when you communicate with them, talk to them about their stuff and their neighbor stuff, it's all voodoo to them. It's all voodoo to them. So the idea that we argue over the semantics and linguistics of words, even the spelling of voodoo, voodoo has a U in it if we speak in French. Okay, that's it. Voodoo has a U in it if we speak in French. If we're not French, if we're not Creole, if we're not in Haiti, if we're not in the French speaking parts of Africa, voodoo doesn't require a U. And the idea that some of you all are still, you know, tripping over that. I say respect the voodoo with four O's, and every now and then I have a person who has to respond back with a U. And I question, are you saying somehow that Haitian voodoo is superior to all voodoo? A U is superior to all O's? So it's too many details that we're stumbling over, petty details that we're stumbling over. We can't see the forest for the trees as it relates to the true nature of African-based traditional systems, indigenous religious practice, and we're trying to squeeze that into a modern society, a modern context, and make that make sense. So, witch has been a popular word, which I don't know, 9 months, I would say, in social media in terms of sort of the over popularized usage of the word witch. I also want to address Black witch in particularly, um, because I understand the emotion. I have empathy for some of the motivation behind the usage of Black witch. And I myself sometimes use as a tag, hashtag Black magic. But we have to be clear about what that is. Are we saying, I had a brief spat with a white guy online about a month ago. In fact, it was New Year's Eve. Everybody was up. It was, 11 o'clock at night. Some of us were celebrating, but were interacting on Instagram. And I can't remember what the exact post was, but I used the reference Black magic. His response was that I was being racist, that I was then talking somehow about Black magic. Okay. Um, and so it revealed many things to me because this is a very, I think he sent me like 7 texts between 11 and midnight, enumerating on how wrong and racist and prejudiced I was to use the term Black magic, and how he could educate me about world magic and other manifestations of magic. And my basic response was, you can't educate me about magic if you don't understand the difference between Black and white magic. And you don't understand that Black and white magic has nothing to do with race. It really doesn't. Now, in the conscious community, in the Black community, in the pop cultural community, and again, I'm guilty of doing it. I use hashtag Black magic. And sometimes I do mean black magic. And it might be a fashion picture, it might be a music video with black people in it. But then there is a clear distinction when we're talking about magic itself between what black and white magic is. And there's no singular practitioner of one or the other. We all have two hands. We all have a left hand and a right hand. We all have a left brain and a right brain. All of us are capable of operating within the realms of black and white magic. And when you view it from the place, because I always have to bring crystal into everything. When you view it from a place of crystal, we're vibrating light, and light encompasses all colors in the color spectrum. I'm talking about color. I'm talking about light. I'm not talking about race. I'm not talking about ethnicity. I'm not talking about shade. Okay. So when we say black magic, are you talking about I am a practitioner of black magic? Even saying dark arts now today, just like with the word nigga, just like with the word bitch, there are segments of society that feel we need to recapture these words and regain the power from them, turn them around, and somehow we can use them and now change the very meaning. And I don't agree. I don't agree with nigga, and I don't agree with calling a woman a bitch. I still hear female dog. I still hear slave when either of these words are being used, regardless of the color of the individual that's using them. When I hear black witch, okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to clarify. And so, first, I'm going to ask, what spirit practice are you operating in? What lineage are you operating in? Even witches have a lineage. I know some real witches of many races that understand their lineage, their ethnic lineage, and can identify with that lineage. But many people are using it because they like candles, they like tarot cards, they like crystals, all of which don't signify voodoo or witchcraft, by the way. These are more modernized, socialized tools that we've all become comfortable with. On stone were used in magic in Egypt and even before Egypt. Tarot cards, we know, is a sort of a modern invention. If I'm correct, I want to say 1500s. Um, in Italy, we would have started seeing people taking ancient Egyptian and Middle Eastern and other symbolism and archetypes and then incorporating them into what we know now as the tarot cards of today. So when we say witch, be clear about who you are and what you're identifying with and what you're speaking. And indeed, witchcraft is not favored in Africa. So the usage of which, when you're approaching a Nigerian, when you're approaching a Ghanaian, when you're approaching a South African, it's going to often be the same response that you would get in the Western world. All the ideas and the connotations of evil and negativity float to the surface. We don't get the idea that you're a healer, but you're calling yourself a witch. We don't get the idea that you're a light worker, but you're utilizing the term witch. And so we've got to be clear about what these things are, how they manifest, how we're self-identifying. It's okay to self-identify. One of the principles of Kwanzaa is our ability to self-determination. So it's okay to self-determine who and what you are, but then don't step to me or someone who's operating legitimately in any of these traditions and not be able to clarify who you are and clarify your position and expect people to understand and accept your truth if you can't stand in it. If you can't stand in it. I'm going to check now for your comments. I know I've talked for like 40 minutes. And so I want to check and make sure that I'm not missing your comments. I greet each and every one of you, welcome each and every one of you for being present in the middle of your day at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time, to be here with the Divine Prince for revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Thank you, Kay Amina. I certainly honor the God in you. You are the queen and the goddess. And I certainly appreciate you for all your help and your support for making this happen. It's hard to do several things at once, so you got to have a team to make this happen, and I appreciate you. Uh, Divine All Blessed Martha Martinez, greetings and salutations. I welcome each and every one of you. I am looking for your questions and your comments to be capitalized. Uncle Glenn, thank you. There is a lot of people in Baton Rouge playing witch to cause harm. You know, using all systems to cause harm is a human condition. It is not a condition that is necessarily specific to any one practice, save truly witchcraft. And again, witchcraft has many tenets that don't acknowledge humanity, that don't acknowledge protocol, that don't acknowledge respect, mutual respect, that don't acknowledge balance. Some of the activities within the realm of witchcraft seek to work against nature, seek to control nature, and to dominate nature. So we've got to be careful about using many of these terminologies. Kataya's mom, I hope I pronounced Kataya's name right. Yeah, we have to be very clear about the terminology that we use and what it really means and what it represents. And I know many of you find, the word nigger offensive, and forgive me for using that as an example, but it is indeed an example of a terminology, a word that we continue to use, continue to popularize, continue to seek to sort of rewrite and redirect what it means and its energy. But words hold power. And a true, authentic witch understands word hold power. That's one of the things that you learn in becoming a witch. Yes, Zion, Israel, witches absolutely do have lineage for sure, and they are rooted in European ethnic groups. I have a friend here in New Orleans who is Black, but also Italian, has done her homework. She's a public figure, so I don't want to quite give away all her business. But she understands her lineage as a witch back to the source. She even can speak some of the words, some of the language. Gypsies, for instance, is another misidentified group, this misidentified tribe of people. There's a legitimate group of gypsies, which can be traced by way of lineage. And then there's modern usage of the word gypsies, where we call anybody with a long dress and crystal ball and a fortune teller a gypsy. That's a popularized, bastardized way of identifying gypsies. Fire reds, how do we identify? Forgive me for sounding repetitive, but you got to do that DNA work. And I know some people, again, are, apprehensive about this whole DNA concept, but you got to do that DNA. Even if your family is most reliable in passing down information. And many of us, we trust our family. If Big Mama say you Black and Indian, you believe you Black and Indian. My family talked about being Black and Indian for generations. I was the first to actually take a DNA test to determine ethnicity, and less than 1% Native American, and a great deal of it showed up in my mother's bloodline, not my father's bloodline, who assumed themselves to be Black Indian. In the revised DNA results, because they've been revised now. They have a larger pool of tests to look at. Native American, now the geographic region for Native American has now been increased from just North America. Many of us look at the Indian in a very white supremacist uh, American way, versus Native or Indigenous American, which encompasses all of Canada, all of North America, and a great deal of South America. So how do we identify is very difficult to do accurately without the DNA. Historically, we've done it word of mouth, particularly in people of color. Our history has been passed down through word of mouth, and even divination to some degree has been utilized to sort of clarify lineage. But that's how you identify. It's not just because you manifest a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And that indeed can play a role. Many of you have heard my Arabic music story, my Sufi music story. Many of you have heard me talk about the Native American, Indigenous American might be a better word, and its connection to who I am and my family. But DNA, for all intents and purposes, is the best way um, to self-identify lineage. Mystique Daydreamer, thank you for that. Um, we might be related. We have some similar, I have some Cameroon background, I have some Nigerian Bantu roots. I have a lot more Ghanaian, Ewe, Fanti bloodline than I do Nigerian. But I do have Igbo Nigerian bloodline. Igbo, some people say Igbo, Igbo, some say Igbo, Ibo. In my bloodline, absolutely. And I do have some European blood, Western European, Scandinavian blood. So again, if I were to then seek lineage in terms of which, I would then follow that path back, back to the source. There is no source of witches in Africa. There is no source of witches as we know them in indigenous culture and society. Again, we're stumbling over semantics, language usage. The things that we are identifying as witch would have been identified by other words, other terms, and would have denoted a very different purpose than the Halloween pointy hat, modern day witch, sticking pins in dolls as it shows up in Voodoo kind of demonstration of a hodgepodge of many cultures and traditions masking in pop culture as paganism and witchcraft. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being present. Please don't let me talk the hour away. I welcome your questions. I welcome your comments. I welcome your criticisms. All is a blessing in this space. It is a safe space to share your honest opinions, to stand in your truth. I want to talk about witches. I want to talk about Black girl magic. I see someone, screen moved on me, so forgive me. Zion Israel, Black girl magic. Um, Define that. What is Black girl magic? Um, is it the Black girl who has a high IQ, who's 17 and going into college, or is it a Black girl? And even the usage of the word girl, for me, minimalizes the womanhood of the Black woman, of the Black queen. So these popularized words and phraseologies are troubling and problematic, particularly for those of us in the group who are then looking to connect to the practices and the traditions in a more authentic way. And so, are we talking about magic? And indeed, there's magic, and there's also witchcraft, and there's also other forms of healing and manifestation. Is that indeed what we're saying when we say Black Girl Magic? And is that the message that's being conveyed? Is that a clear understanding among us, collectively, that that is what's being said, that's what is being emphasized when we say and we use those words? Um, Uncle Glenn, I've said before that I'm not getting any commission from any of the DNA sites at all. I'm looking forward to it. And if I had a preference, it would be Ancestry.com. I've done a lot for Ancestry.com. I have a very popular story in the media based in Ancestry.com, and it is on my YouTube page. But I've tried more than one source, and I suggest using more than one source and comparing them, um, looking for differences, looking for variations, looking for the volume of information that each source specializes. What I get from Ancestry.com is different than what I get from 23andMe. I've also noted that 23andMe is not as popular as Ancestry.com. So I'm getting third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, and deeper in my Ancestry.com, whereas I have siblings and closer first cousins, second cousins that are showing up in my Ancestry.com. So I support you in that. I don't have a problem with 23andMe. I will say that I have not done the medical portion of 23andMe. Some people in the room are really concerned about their DNA being utilized for nefarious purposes. I personally am not that concerned about it, but I know some people in the room are concerned about it. So, I haven't done the medical portion, and it's not because I have a fear of what's going on there. I just haven't. My interest has been more in ancestry, so I haven't really looked at the medical portion of the 23andMe. But I would be very happy to hear your results, your response to it, what manifests for you from it. So again, Kim Gladden, I've taken Ancestry.com, I've taken 23andMe. I have some initiates and godchildren and people who are doing ancestral work with me who've done tests. I believe it's called Africa Ancestry. Don't quote me on that. Um, but there are at least 5 really good tests out there. I don't want you to choose one because I say it's the best. Um, if you use the ones that I've used, great. If you use the ones that I have not used, I want to know about it. And we would like to know what your experience is and what information is being revealed. And okay, so Ashley Harris, one of my godchildren, Ashley Harris, have you taken the ancestry, African ancestry, and do you know the location of that? Is it AfricanAncestry.com? Put that in the chat for me. Make that a little bit more clear for us. We'd appreciate to know what your experience with African ancestry has been and how it compares to the other tests. I just behoove you to take the test. Some of the tests are expensive, and therefore they are not as popular, Kim Gladden, as some of the other tests. Because people often, I did a video on cost and spirituality. People are often shopping for things based on price. I want that experience, but I want it at the cheapest price. Some of us are looking for details, deeper information. So let your spirit be your guide, Kim, please. And let us know what test, what company you use, and how it varies In a group like this, there are 32 people in the group right now. We are operating at 32 degrees at this very moment. So within the range of diversity of tests, just within this group, we can gather a greater knowledge of information without all of us having to take all of these tests. But the process is still new. The technology is still new. So those of us who are taking the test are doing a service to everybody because they can eventually fill in the blanks. We've seen them do so with crime. They've caught criminals who had never taken a DNA test before, but because some of their family members had taken the test, they were able to determine who the criminal was. There have been paternity suits that have been determined where the father might have been killed or murdered or passed on, and so they now test through the grandparents or other people in the family. So everybody doesn't have to take the test. I'm not going to spend any time arguing with people who, you know, have some sort of adverse feeling about the test. You're justified in that, but those of us who want that information, particularly for ancestry purposes, um, take the test by all means and share your experience. Bring your experience back here to this space and share it with us. But if I wasn't clear, there indeed is a lineage for witches, not for witchcraft, for witches. Witchcraft is a system just like any other organized religion, just like any other organized practice, is an organized system for operating in the knowledge base that is witchcraft. And it often involves the binding of spirits, the understanding of how to draw signets, how to write and communicate in other languages, angelic, Theban, are two very popular magical languages that are learned. I should say alphabets as opposed to languages because many of these don't have a verbalization. Many of them are lost and don't have a way of verbalizing. And verbalization is also critical in operating any form of magic, particularly with witches and witchcraft. So there's another degree of information that has to be studied there. But witchcraft absolutely has a lineage, and it does not have a root in witchcraft. I mean, in Africa. As we see it manifest in Africa, it is people operating in an abusive way in utilizing ancient traditions, usually to bring harm, to do harm, or to disrupt the order of things. I see you, Uncle Glenn. Absolutely, and we always can. You know where we communicate. I'll respond to you again in more detail in our private communications. But I think that's a good move. I like Ancestry. Uh, I like the way it's set up. I found 23andMe to be a little bit more confusing. I also like the social ability in Ancestry. You actually can communicate with people in both sites, but Ancestry makes it a little bit easier for you. And I found the interactions that I've had with those people that I have met in my bloodline on Ancestry, for the most part, to be positive. Yes, Katya's mom, Enokin, is a colonized name for angelic language and lettering. Um, Enoch is also a reference to a ancient representative of magical arts, and that shows up in portions of the Bible that have been removed. We know that uh, they held a meeting in Europe to determine what was going to be kept in the Bible and what was not going to be utilized, because some of the passages in some of the books were seen to be subversive. They went against, what they wanted at the time in terms of government and control of the people. Some of the passages in the books elevated women in a way that they didn't want to see. Um, um, I believe that there was even reference to people of more than one sex in some of the books that were removed, and one is the Book of Enoch. And so there's a great deal of magical symbolism, archetypes that come directly from Enoch in the Book of Enoch that have now made their way into magical practices and traditions. Um, but it is not witchcraft itself in Enoch. And witchcraft seeks to utilize organized structures. Again, why I believe witchcraft itself comes from a reaction to organized religions, a way of turning upside down the protocols of organized religions, defecating on organized symbolism, um, disrespecting and desecrating the sacredness of what these organized structures have set up. And so that is where witchcraft, as we know it, was birthed, was born. And from there, just like voodoo and hoodoo in some cases, a desire to fight back the master, fight back the system, to take power in cases where we didn't have access to power. Uh, then once we move beyond to some degree that need, the urgency of that need, it then became something that people use against each other and on themselves in a way of battling plantation drama, house fit nigga, field nigga drama. Um, you get certain privileges I'm not getting drama. Many of the same drama and pettiness and fleshiness that people deal with today. But that then expands these traditions into an arena that's not rooted in tradition, that's not rooted in the original purpose and intent of these traditions. And now you're talking about witchcraft. And that's why witches, just the word witch carries such an egregious connotation in which in Africa. And they're burning people and they're doing great harm to people in the name of witches and witchcraft. Albinos are being killed and murdered for their body parts in parts of Africa, particularly Sahara in South Africa, um, for the sake of empowering witchcraft. And not to save famine, not to save the society from some pestilence, or some egregious disease, but for greed, for money, for power, for materialism, for very carnal, earth based desires. And these are the energies that separate, that distinguish witchcraft from other earth based sciences, other earth based practices. I welcome and greet each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here with us, for being present. I do appreciate and welcome your questions, comments, and requests. Please do type them in capital letters so that I can see them clearly and respond to them for you. Um, Again, I don't want to just talk. I'm not here to hear the sound of my own voice. If I want to hear the sound of my own voice, I would be singing through the show. I am here to share, to teach, to open the way for, to repair, to bring those who are here at this crossroads, because indeed this is a crossroads. This is a virtual crossroads. And we're all here traveling very unique and very individual paths, very unique in individual destinies, very unique in individual purposes. My desire is to share and create a space where people can get in touch with themselves, but also this knowledge in a way that's accessible to the modern person in a modern context, but does not negate the indigenous, does not negate the ancestral, does not negate tradition. I'm not here to undo tradition. I'm not here to undo voodoo tradition. I'm not here to undo Mardi Gras Indian tradition. I'm not here to undo any tradition. I'm here to bring clarification, to bring knowledge, to bring empowerment to the individual, to uh, provide an access and a gateway to a real authentic connection to, and a revival of a power that belongs to us, that is innate in us. At the root of voodoo is not only nature, but revival, but revolution, but liberation, liberté, but freedom is at the root of voodoo. Empowerment is at the root of voodoo. Healing is at the root of voodoo. Justice is at the root of voodoo. Many of the things that are at the root of Kemetic science and tradition are indeed at the root of voodoo. And in ancient Egypt, we brought our gifts, we brought our surplus, we brought our wares and our offerings to the temple, to the storehouse, not to enrich the gods, not to enrich the priest, not to enrich the pastors and the ministers and the motivational speakers, but to enrich the people and to provide resources for the people in times of famine, in times of war, in times of great distress. So we've got to return not only physically to an indigenous way of doing things, how we look, how we dress, how we set up our shrines, what our altars look like, but we've got to renew our minds. Yoruba call that or in Haitian voodoo, there's a lave tete that's a part of your kanzo and your initiation that renews the mind, that cleanses, that refreshes, that opens the way for empowerment. We create and recreate our reality first in our God selves, in our God being, and then that is projected into our waking reality. This reality that we share, but also the reality that we perceive to be our reality. For indeed, we perceive our reality. It doesn't match what reality might truly be. You know, it might be raining and storming outside right now in New Orleans, but it's sunshine in here. And it is indeed sunshine in here and in here. So we create and recreate our reality. We exist in multiple realities at once. And particularly when we look at magic, witchcraft, and the usage of that, understanding, clarifying, getting clear, just like your quartz crystal, is critical to operating in any of these traditions, and particularly more volatile and unstable traditions like witchcraft. Do I sometimes utilize the word witch? Absolutely, I do. I'm an actor, I'm a performer, I'm a cultural performer, I'm a singer, I'm a musician, I'm an artisan, I'm a performance artist. So I often use my words very clearly, very directly, very consciously. I'm also a very literal person. I'm a grown man in his mid 50s with Asperger. So I use my words very deliberately. I remember right now the story of Maya Angelou, who was raped and abused as a child and told, and her family killed the man who harmed her. And she went mute for several years, I believe 7 years as a child. She wouldn't speak. And then when she did speak, she understood and she learned the value of her words, the power of her words to not only do good, but to also do harm. And as we've said in other of the shows, our words then reverberate back to us, particularly when we work in spells, when we're working magic, when we work in ritual, when you're doing prayers, even your prayers reverberate back to you. And so wording, terminology, what you ask for, how you ask for it is critical. Divine self-healing, thank you, the Council of Nicaea. You knew I had a brain freeze, and that's what I was looking for. Yes, the Council of Nicaea, that is where they decided the Book of Enoch along with many other magical books, would not be included in the Bible. I believe there's a story of a shepherd boy in Egypt who went out into an unincorporated area and found some clay vessels that then, revealed some of these lost books of the Bible. So thank you for that. It was the Council of Nicaea that decided that the book of Enoch would not be included. Orisha, thank you so much for being present. Lineage is absolutely important. In both good and bad, lineage is absolutely important. If mental health runs in your family, if alcoholism runs in your family, if abuse runs in your family, you can't deny lineage is important. If you survive the Middle Passage, if you're now suffering post-traumatic slave disorder, you cannot deny that lineage is important. Whether you acknowledge it or not is irrelevant. In fact, it's extremely relevant because in the denial of lineage, that we then allow things to go unfixed and unrepaired. In the acknowledgement of lineage, we then can address the work and what needs to be acknowledged and removed and fixed and repaired, and we can be then empowered from lineage. Ashley Harris, I see your capitalized question. In Ifa, there are Iyami. Iyami are our great mothers, and there's a simpler group of women in Voodoo. Um, I've talked about that in previous um, shows. Depending on the ethnic group, depending on the language. Now, Iyami is often translated as the witches for some reason. And then that's not a correct or the best um, instruction. In fact, Iyami, and I'm reading your question, you say, or mothers. When we look at Yoruba, because you say Ifa, that's Yoruba. Galede, Gelede, is the ancestral masquerade, the Egungun masquerade of the great mothers, our great mothers. Iyami then is seen as the power of women. It is the power of women, and that's why it is often misinterpreted as witches, because the power of women is seen so great, so powerful, so frightful, so undestructible that even in indigenous West African culture and Yoruba culture, they see it as a power measurable to that of witches. Um, and so there is a close relationship between the idea of witches and magic and Iyami that follows women, and particularly black women, throughout society, throughout creation. Some of the fear and oppression of black women is not just because of your skin or your hips, or your thighs, or your ability to nurture and mother, but also your ability to use the power of Iyami to do harm. And the power of Iyami, just like the power of Oso, Voodoo is the male correspondence to Iyami is Oso. And so its original purpose is to bring justice, is to bring balance, is to kill the pedophile, is to capture the thief and maim the person who's doing harm, is to bring balance and to bring justice in the community, in the village. Um, so yes, Iyami is not so much our mothers, but the power of our mothers, power of women. Uh, the idea of blood, as you know, in Ifa and in Voodoo is so the idea of humanity through the woman being gifted the power of birth, of creation, uh, of the blood. It all equates to a great uh, and dangerous magic. I often describe New Orleans voodoo as both uh, legendary and feared. Indeed, some, romance Marie Laveau and romance voodoo culture the way we have romance Orisha and Loa. But there's a hardcore foundational archaeological structure to this voodoo and this practice that's rooted in justice, that's rooted in bringing balance, that's rooted in correcting. Uh, for indeed, balance is critical to not only Ifa but all West African-based traditional systems. Um, Melissa Warthen, I certainly appreciate your being here in the group and your question. Have I met Iyanla Vanzant, and does she follow Ifa, or is she a follower of another practice and or tradition? Um, that's a great and personal question. I have not physically met Iyanla Vanzant as of yet. Iyanla Vanzant has visited New Orleans many times. We have been in the same proximity. We have been at some of the same events, and I have still yet to directly meet Iyanla Vanzant. Once upon a time, I invited her to, by way of online communication, I invited her to participate in my radio show on Blog Talk Radio, and she agreed and said that she would. This was back before Fix Your Life. This was back before she fell out with Oprah. I would say this was in the year before she and Oprah had that little bump in the road. I didn't hear back from her for a while. The next thing I saw or noted was the apology. Some of you remember that show, her and Oprah coming together, and the apology and the explanation of what happened. So I assumed that, okay, Iyanla Vanzant's busy, and that's why I haven't heard back from her. So I reached out to her again in recent years. And of course, she said, absolutely, I'm going to come and do the show. Contact my people to get back with your people, that sort of thing. And then I haven't heard from her. One of my godchildren, or former godchildren, actually studies also with Iyanla Vanzant in Maryland. So I've we've passed communications back and forth through that particular individual. So that is as close as I've actually gotten to Iyanla Vanzant. She is initiated in Ifa, as far as I know, to my understanding. She does apply many Ifa-like principles to Fix Your Life. Some of them are overt. Some of them are a little bit more covert, not quite as obvious. I noticed that she doesn't quite use the language. Uh, she doesn't use Yoruba, but she also doesn't um, use the English translation or understanding of some of what I see in the show. She finds a more new age, therapeutic, less cemented way of presenting the Ifa on her show, but it's not overt. Um, in terms of her following other practices, I can't really speak to that. I'm sure there's some Christian in there. I've seen a great demonstration of Christianity from Iyanla Vanzant. I would even say in more recent years, I've seen a resurgence, a rebirthing of more Christianized symbolism. So I'm not qualified, authorized, or would it be appropriate for me to speak to, her commitment to other traditions. I've seen her wear her ID, so I know she still honors and acknowledges Ifa. So that's a great question. I appreciate that, Melissa. Thank you for being present. Um, I'm also looking now, Ashna Mahari. I always kind of stumble over your name. I hope I'm saying that right. And I see it capitalized. I hope I'm looking at a question, not a comment. You say, I don't call myself a witch, but I want to know what it is when you are visited by deceased ancestors and given instruction and messages. Also, I wake up at 3:30 a.m. often. Okay, that's great. Now, I can respond to that. Um, you don't have to be a witch to be visited by dead people. That's the first thing. Um, Even Hollywood sort of got that in the movie. I can't even remember the name of the movie where, the kid sort of historically says, I see dead people. Um, Everybody sees dead people. Uh, what goes with that is the knowledge. Are you even aware you're seeing dead people? You are, but I'm asking a general question. Some people aren't even aware that they are seeing dead people. So first there's that knowledge. And then how do you distinguish dead people from other things or other living beings? A dead people in almost a real physical form and look just like a living human being, but dead people can also show up as ghosts. Dead people can also show up as disincarnate, disembodied spirits. And indeed, then dead people can show up in your dreams in both symbolic form, in human form, and even embody other people. And so, a total stranger or a friend might speak the words of someone who's passed on, speak the energy of someone who's passed on. So, discerning spirit is critical. Now, deceased ancestors visiting you could also note that you may be a griot organically. Griots often know the history of the family, know the relations of the family, can rattle off, your cousins and your aunties and your uncles much easier, much readily than other people in the family. Griots are the storytellers. Griots know the histories. Griots know um, the secrets within the family. That too can be a reason that deceased ancestors will not only come to you, visit you, but give you instructions. And if you're serious about giving instructions, instructions and messages are verifiable. Are they giving you messages that are worth something? Are they giving you messages that are uh, provable? Are they telling you, the watch is in the second drawer and you look in the second drawer and it's absolutely in the second drawer? You've got to test the spirit. You got to test those messages to not only ensure that you're getting them from deceased ancestors, but that they are indeed legitimate, authentic. I don't believe that deceased ancestors come through for entertainment. They certainly aren't going to say gibberish. They certainly aren't going to say things to you that aren't important. They certainly aren't going to give you instructions that aren't important, that aren't relevant, that aren't testable, that aren't provable. So again, keep a journal. Make sure you're documenting what's happening, what's being said, the instructions, and following up on the instructions. For indeed, if the instructions are authentic, you've got to follow through. Not following through can be problematic. And many of you feel that you might be blocked. Some of you feel your life might be cursed. Some of you feel people are adamantly working on you and against you. And you might want to consider that you've made relationship, you've made obligation with both your ancestors and your deceased relatives that you have not fixed and or acknowledged. Some of you have tragedy in your family, young people in particular, who've been murdered, killed, passed on in violence, in other tragic ways. The living family members, the living humanity, has a responsibility to fix, repair, to bring balance to that thing. So it does not end in just put him in the ground. Um, you have to seek justice. You have to seek balance. If not in that particular specific scenario, bringing peace to the village, bringing peace to the house, bringing peace to the family. Being woken up in the twilight hours of the day is a sign of spirit communication, particularly if you're on a normalized cycle, as many of us in the Western world are. You're probably at work, if not 9 to 5. Everybody didn't work 9 to 5. You might work 7 to 3, or second shift, something like that. But in a more balanced scenario, most people sleep at night and are up during the day. So when I say twilight hours, I mean 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And particularly if you work and you have children and a family and you keep a regular schedule, and then you need those hours of sleep. You absolutely are required those hours of sleep. And now you're being woken up at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You're being woken by spirit. And you should acknowledge that. Some would say you're being woken up by God, and you might be woken up by God. Again, you have to test the spirit. Wake up. If you can, keep your eyes closed. Be quiet. Be still. Listen. And just listen. And then acknowledge and identify what's taking place. Also, you might be woken up at that time to write and record. Many of you are being woken up in the twilight hours to get up and write. And you should spend that time writing and releasing that information. Some of you will cross over into automated writing, where you'll be given information to write and record. And you should acknowledge that. You shouldn't fight or wrestle with. And even medical doctors and physicians say that if you are waking up like that, you should absolutely get up, go to a lit place, like, go in your kitchen, turn the lights on, expose yourself to daylight, even artificial light bulbs, like this light bulb here is a daylight bulb, because our sleep cycles are also regulated by melatonin, not just the melanin in our body, but our exposure to the sun, the amount of vitamin D that we're taking in. So you're being woken up to communicate with spirit in twilight, in those hours. Fire Reds. I have a great deal of knowledge on Lama Damas. Lama Damas is for lack of better words, a Hispanic archetype for the dead. Um, it's a form of Gede, if you will. It's not as volatile as Gede. As I said on the show yesterday, Gede is never invited. Gede just shows up. Gede often represents what's wrong, what's not fixed, what's not repaired in a lineage or bloodline. Whereas Lama Damas first come through in a physical form. Lama Damas, um, a woman, a mother, often youthful. The statuary is often showing a woman in I would say in her early 30s. She's mature but youthful. She's strong, still childbearing years, still working hard. So there's a lot of symbolism in that with the La Madamas. The color of the dress and the attire that they wear, but they are representative of gypsies to some degree, but from the dead. Um, Gypsies are called by another name in Spanish, but La Madamas are a mother figure, a woman figure, but represent sort of the helpful, beneficial spirits that come through from the realm of the dead, and our ancestors that are here to help us, that are here to assist us in some kind of important way. So I think that's a great question. I don't actually have Lama Dama here in my temple space, but I'm familiar with her. I have clients, my Spanish-speaking clients, who work with her. So I have some knowledge. Um, yeah, feeling like a griot, GRIO, just put a T on that, fire reds. It's a challenge. It's a blessing, but it's also a challenge. When your ancestral family chooses you to be a griot, you're being asked to take on a great deal of responsibility. And particularly if you come from a family of drama like I do, a family full of secrets, a family full of mysteries, a family full of, brokenness. It's a lot of responsibility. And even if they aren't aware that you're doing the work, you are, your body's aware, and know that you will be rewarded greatly, greatly. Griots are rewarded greatly, often with long life, often with great health. They often outlive many people in their family. They often grow old in a very healthy and youthful sort of way. So griots, just like all authentic practitioners of Spanish, are rewarded. Authentic practitioners of spiritual practices are rewarded for their effort when we do it wholeheartedly, but you pay a price for it. Also, if you didn't hear me say before, Fire Red, you want to gather as much information as you can. Like when people in your family pass on, you want to gather those obituaries. And there might be people who've already passed on, like grandparents or matriarchs or patriarchs within your family that may already have obituaries out there. So find a way, find your words, find your communication to ask some of your older people in your family for that. Try and get, some of those obituaries. And if they're not willing to give the actual obituary, make photocopies and bring that into your shrine area where you house your ancestors. But it's a great responsibility when you are chosen to be griot. You can't decide to be griot. You're chosen by your ancestors to be griot. And that's usually how it works. Another sign of griots is often that things do go wrong or have an urgent nature in the family. People will often call you first. You're one of the first people that they're going to call, one of the first people that they're going to lean on, one of the first people that they're going to want to share their story with. And so, yes, being chosen as a griot for your family is a great undertaking, a great undertaking. I appreciate you being here present in the middle of your lunch hour, in the middle of your day, to share with Voodoo Chief Divine Prince here in New Orleans. I certainly appreciate your activity and your attention, your sharing of my YouTube channel, your sharing in my Instagram. I certainly appreciate you. I appreciate the donations and the offerings. Without you, I would starve. Without you, the lights would not be on. Without you, I wouldn't be able to afford internet. Um, Without you, I wouldn't be able to perform culturally. I wouldn't be able to show up in this way on Mardi Gras Day without the support of each and every one of you. But know that your sharing of content, your sharing of posts is also very beneficial to me. You're spreading the word about who we are and what we do and what we share in this space is very beneficial to me. And I'm indeed grateful. Many of you have seen my most recent post about uh, the Bradders. They're known as Barney Walsh and his son, who visited here at the House of Divine Prince. And I showed up in the reality show Breaking Dad. So we are in the UK, we are in Africa, we are in various parts of the world. If I need to, I'll repost my analytic map, which will show you the reach of not only myself and this show, but the reach of Voodoo. Voodoo is global, Voodoo is worldwide. Black people are all over the world now. And so the ancestors follow us. The traditions have followed us into new places, new terrain. Voodoo followed us by way of the Middle Passage, was encapsulated by way of the Middle Passage and seeded itself in the New World. And now, by way of technology, Voodoo is everywhere. So we must guard, we must protect, we must show great honor, We must show great respect to that which is sacred. We're talking about that which is sacred. And so we show honor and respect to that which is sacred, with the understanding that we gain power, we gain empowerment, we gain access to that which is beneficial, not only to ourselves, but to all. So it's to our benefit to protect, just like we protect the animals, just like we protect water, to protect culture. Some of the last surviving untouched indigenous cultures in South America are being threatened now, not just by, globalization, not just by deforesting, now through technology, now through satellites where we can watch and observe them, you know, uh, and they have no knowledge of technology yet. So we must guard culture. Culture is sacred. Indeed, I represent culture in a commercial platform. I perform, I act, I gig, and show up as a representative of our culture and our tradition in movies, TV, commercial, advertisements, and the like. But I try to do so with honor. I try to do so with dignity. I believe I've given a voice and a face and a platform to voodoo in a modern world, in the modern context, which often only saw voodoo as serpent in the rainbow, skeleton key, fiction and fantasy. Voodoo has been authenticated. This revival has re-authenticated that is us. That's which belongs to us. That's which exists in us. That which is desperately seeking to empower us, just like it empowered us at Bois Cayman in Haiti. So I invite each and every one of you to stand in your truth, speak your truth, acknowledge your ancestors, acknowledge that power which exists within each and every one of us, and come at it authentically. Come at it organically, knowing that you will gain the very thing that it's a distraction. It ultimately takes you away from the goal. It will not give you the empowerment and the celebrity and the fame and the fortune that you seek, playing with the voodoo, playing around with the witchery and the witchcraft. If you're going to do it, be true, be authentic, be informed, be knowledgeable, be trained, be experienced. I'm looking for your questions and your comments. Please do give them in your all capital letters. I most certainly do appreciate you. Thank you so much, Daniel Neal. Thank you all. Listen, it's very close to Mardi Gras Day. I need your support. I appreciate your support. PayPal me. I'm still not quite clear about the YouTube donation button. I'm still not clear about that. I have a preference for, it is sacred for both you and me that you PayPal me. Use my PayPal. If you aren't familiar with PayPal me, paypal.me/the Divine Prince. You can also visit my website at www.houseofthedivineprince.com. Divine is spelled with 2 I's and 1 E. I guess someone's texting me through Instagram right now who claims my email address isn't working, even though many of you know that when I send you my email address in Instagram, the website itself is automatically hyperlinked. And you can just click on the link and it'll take you directly to my website and you can enter your request there, even if you are having difficulties with the email. So, beloved, if you're watching, if you're listening, my email is fine. My website is fine. I accept your questions, your comments, and your requests by way of email at DivinePrince, 2 I's, 1 E, DIVINE, Divine Prince, at houseofthedivineprince.com. All is truly and indeed a blessing. If you have any more questions, comments, or requests for me that you need me to address here in this live chat room, do type it in all capital letters. Otherwise, I'm going to be ending the show. Maybe in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to bring an end to the show. I really anticipated more interaction from you today on this topic, since so many people are infatuated with the whole notion and concept of witchcraft and witchery and the popularizing of sort of the black girl magic, you know, hashtag, which I see as being completely separate from witchcraft and magic itself. If you are using it in the light, you need to clarify that. Uh, be clear about it. But I was anticipating a great deal more discussion and talk since the idea is so popular right now in our culture and in our society. But if I've said enough and you all have shared enough, and there aren't any more questions to be addressed, I am going to end the show and look forward to meeting you back here on tomorrow at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time for the Power Lunch, Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. I'm looking at my acting and performance schedule. I most certainly should be here tomorrow at noon, and I look forward to sharing with you again in this sacred space of God and goddesses. I look forward to your request. I do have some appointment slots available for both today and tomorrow. So submit your emails and I'll get you in as soon as possible. As I said on yesterday, it is Carnival. Mardi Gras is one day. Carnival is a month-long celebration. So Carnival is happening. Tourists are in the city. People are arriving. Appointments are becoming much more difficult to get. So send your request in. I'll be more than happy to assist you. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. I am here because of you. I do what I do for you, for the community, for the people, for the voodoo. Respect the voodoo, respect the voodoo, respect the ancestors. The ancestors see you, the ancestors see me, the ancestors see all. All is a blessing.